You know, we talk a lot about wealth on this show as it relates to finances, money, and investing, but today we have something a little different as it relates to it. We have a patriot, an inspiration, and the Sheriff of Pinal County in Arizona. So it's an honor to bring on Mark Lamb.
Thank you for having me. And I saw your post earlier this week where you said, we got a couple big podcasts coming out today. I thought, hope she's talking about me.
Yes, no, we've been social friends for a while, and so I'm glad that we've been able to do this.
Great to meet you in person, by the way.
Same here, same here. There's so many ways that I want to go, and there's a lot that I want to unpack. But I think that you have intimate knowledge about something that is on every American's mind. And if it isn't, it should be, and it will definitely be talked about over and over again over the next 6 months in our country. So given your history and the experience and your position currently that you're in, can you share a little bit about what is actually going on at our borders and how much of what we see in the media is real? Are we actually getting the real story? Is it fluffier than what's going on? I'd love for you to just share how bad is it and what's happening down there?
It's such a great question. When you ask the question like that, I just have all this stuff flow into my head. Like, where do we go with this? Let me simplify it down to the fact that I think crisis is probably even an understatement as to what's going on at the southern border. And then you talk about what is the media showing. You know, I think you have two types of media. You have a very left that caters to one party of this country, you know, one belief system of the country, and they're getting one thing about the border, and it's oftentimes referred to as a manufactured crisis. And then you get another side which is trying to tell another story, and they get accused of being fear-mongering. And the reality is neither side is really telling you the depth of the problem.
How so?
I think most people can't handle the fact that when you tell them the cartels, the brutality of the cartels, that they kill people without thinking of it. They traffic women, they rape women, they traffic children, they rape children, they extort men, they will chop people to pieces, they will decapitate people, there is no limit to what the cartels will do to further power and their business in this country. And that's what most Americans don't hear, and they don't want to hear it. And then when they do hear it, they say, he's not telling the truth.
Right.
It's just not true. Maybe a lot of that doesn't happen here in this country, but it's happening just on the other side and does spill over into our country. There is a lot of violence that is drug related and cartel related in this country. And a lot of people don't realize just how big the cartels are. We think of these little cartels on the other side of the border and, you know, and they're bringing people over and they're bringing drugs over. No, these are transnational criminal organizations. They have business in 54 different countries. They traffic drugs and human beings all over the world. And they have zero regard for human life. It is merely a commodity to them, and they will throw it in the trash just as soon as it is of no value to them. And they also understand that there are plenty of other human beings lined up to be trafficked into America or any other place in the world, but America being one of the top places. Tax dollars fund the majority of this through NGOs, non-governmental organizations. The drugs are just as bad as they've ever been in this country. You know, when we talk about the border, you must talk about national security. The greatest threat to national security for Americans right now is happening at the southern border. Whether it's the people that are coming from 170 different countries, many of these countries, Sudan, Chad, the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, they're coming from the Middle East, they're coming from Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Syria. From 21 to 23, we had almost 700 Iranians come in through the southern border. And these are the ones that we know about. How many do we not know about? And they're only able to vet about 5% of those people. So that is a national security threat that the FBI is now even acknowledging, saying, yes, the blinking lights are all over the board. But then there's the other piece that I've been talking about a lot is the fentanyl poisoning. You know, the leading cause of death in America right now is fentanyl poisoning.
Wow.
It is killing about 100,000 Americans, and that's between the ages of 18 and 45. Wow. It's killing about 100,000 Americans a year. No army, no enemy has ever had success killing Americans to that level. And yet, how are we not seeing this as the primary threat to us?
And it's just coming in.
It's just flowing in.
Just flowing in.
And Arizona happens to be one of those places where it's the jumping off point. Just to give you some statistics, Border Patrol here in Arizona and CBP, Customs and Border Protection, they seized 110 million pills last year.
Wow.
The DEA throughout the country seized 78 million pills. 48 million of those pills were here in Arizona.
Wow.
So well over 50% of the fentanyl that is seized in this country is coming through Arizona's borders, and that's because of the Sinaloa cartel. But when you talk about terrorism, China has taken the fentanyl and putting it into the hands of the cartels. This is the Opium Wars of 1893. They're putting it in the hands of the cartels. The cartels are then putting it in the hands of Americans, and we're losing loved ones every day because of the fentanyl poisonings. And you talk about terrorism, usually people think, well, it's a bomb going off or a plane crashing into the building. The reality is it's a silent terrorism. They haven't fired a single shot. Yeah. They haven't set off a single bomb. And they've managed to kill 100,000 Americans a year.
It's like there's no need to fly into buildings anymore because this is the silent one that no one's paying attention to.
And they're killing American citizens every day.
And you said something, you said, you know, the left has their story, the right has their story. And then I think what happens are those two different stories pit each other, right? So then it's like the right doesn't even know what to believe, the left doesn't know what to believe if they don't believe these talking points. How does the average person know what to believe? Like, can you share so that we can maybe see, like, okay, somebody comes across the border, they just walk in? Are they being smuggled in? Does somebody have a gun to their head and there's some deal that went down typically and that's why they're coming in? Like, I think sometimes we're disconnected from it because we can't understand fully what's happening. Are you able to share a little bit of that process?
The answer is yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah.
Some people just walk across, but there always is a nexus with the cartels. The cartels don't allow, you know, when we talk about 250,000 people a month coming through, I think a lot of that is being curtailed because the cartels can only handle so much people coming in through.
So like the regular people aren't just coming in.
They all pay the cartels.
They all pay the cartels.
Yeah, and if they don't, then those are very, very, very few and far between. And if the cartels caught them doing it without paying them, they'd be likely killed.
Wow. So the average person, I think that we get this picture painted, right, by one of the sides. It's like, well, what do you want? Those people are trying to better themselves and get a better life. But really, the people that are coming over have to be somehow part of the cartel or paying off a cartel, or otherwise they most likely won't get here. And
it doesn't negate the fact that those may be good people. Many of these people come from third world countries, a lot of them little education. And they're being told, if you come here and you bring this much money, we'll let you into the country. And if you don't have it, you can do it on credit. And the cartels will give you credit for it. But the problem is oftentimes they end up in the sex trade or they end up in the hard labor trade here in America. And so that's the trade-off if you come in on credit. Or you bring your life savings. You know, it could be anywhere. The going rate is about $5,000 to $6,000, and then it goes up from there depending on which country you come from.
Wow.
And what has happened, though, is these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations, not only here in this country and on the southern border, but also globally, have realized that the government is willing to fund these NGOs with tax dollars. And they are then in turn taking those tax dollars and they are basically funding the invasion or the trafficking of humans into our country. You know, and I did a video a while back where I said, it was probably 5 or 6 months ago maybe. And I said, look, when these folks are being processed, they're given a cell phone, they're given a plane ticket to wherever they want to go, and they're given a gift card, sometimes up to $5,000.
And that's all true.
Well, the media lost their minds. They're, oh, he's lying. This is not true. Where are you getting this information? And I would do interviews and they'd say, well, you know, Sheriff, the media is saying that this isn't true. There's somebody saying this isn't true. I said, who? Who says it's not true? The politicians in Washington, D.C., the same people that are telling you they're not walking across the southern border or that the border is secure, those people, the same people who have been lying to you for the last 3.5 years, they're telling you they're not giving gift cards. Here's how they're doing it. They're giving grants to these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations. The non-governmental organizations then give those people plane tickets, gift cards. About 3 weeks after I made that video, and they were Verify, some lame company called Verify said that that was untruthful. Well, about 3 weeks later, the UN admitted they had given out $1.6 billion in gift cards and cash to people coming across our southern border. The state of Washington was found to have given $340 million of COVID money towards people for gift cards and cash to come across the border. There's one NGO after another started admitting that they were giving gift cards. So they're always going to do what they can to try to suppress the truth. So going back to your original question, how do you know the truth? My wife has a great saying. She said one of the hardest things to be, especially with AI and everything else, one of the hardest things to find will be truth. And I have tried to live by one of Jordan Peterson's quotes. It says that you have to have faith in the redeeming power of truth. And so I think what you have to do is really find people where you know and you feel that they're giving you the best truthful information that you can get. Just know that government is always incentivized one way or the other to tell you to either downplay the truth, change the truth in some way, shape, or form, whether they downplay it, whether they accentuate it. The truth is always being manipulated. Government is they are the masters of manipulating the truth to fit their political ideology or their political plan, their political path. I'm in politics, so I see it all the time. What I've tried to do is I think people expect the truth from the sheriff, and so I try to always deliver the truth. I like to say that I do deliver the truth, but you know, sometimes I try to vet the truth as much as possible. I try to be very sure that what I'm telling the people is something that I can back up.
It's so interesting too, because I think that's why, as bad of a situation this is, because anyone in Arizona, Texas, we know how bad it is, right? We can kind of tell. We drive down Scottsdale Road and you see what was a once hotel becomes now a facility where all the people that come across the border are staying at. Do you remember when there was...
that we're paying for, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah, we were paying for them. That was once a hotel that was empty. And now I remember driving by, why is Homeland Security... why do I see that logo? And then all of a sudden, they had it all roped off, and I'm like, Googling, you know, like late at night trying to figure this out, and I'm like, wow, they're bringing in all of these people that have not been vetted, and they're putting them right off of Scottsdale Road into this hotel. And sure, if those people had a horrible situation, they're trying to run from something, but that's not what's actually happening. And I think we're being painted this picture that it's, I don't know, like somehow a Cinderella story of people coming across the border, and that's not it at all.
It's not it. I just listening to something today on the way here, and it was Douglas K. Murray, if you've ever listened to him. He's from England, but very intelligent. And he was talking about immigration, and really he encapsulated it very well. There's the mercy piece of people coming here, but then there's the justice piece of people coming here. I'm in the world of the justice piece, and I still have to balance the mercy of it too. We're the ones that find these folks in the desert that the cartels have left for dead, and sometimes they are dead. We're the ones that are trying to save these families from their children or their loved ones being poisoned by fentanyl. We're the ones that are finding people in the trunk of somebody's car who's being trafficked into this country. Or you catch the children before the cartels completely traffic them in this country. You know, so we understand the mercy piece of it. But there's the justice piece. And so I was talking to a congresswoman from Washington maybe 8 months ago, 10 months ago. And we were talking about the border. And she said, well, Sheriff, what about all the good people that are coming across? I said, that's a great point. I said, let me pose this to you. Let's say there's 10 people that just came across. 5 of them are good, 5 of them are bad. But I don't have time to vet them and tell you who's good and who's bad. Would you let me put them in your house, Congresswoman? And she was quiet, and I said, you're quiet because the answer is no. You're not going to put them in your house. I said, let me take a step further, and maybe even more in line with what the statistics might be. Let's say that 9 of them are good, and 1 of them is bad, but I can't tell you who it is, and he's a sex offender. Would you let me put him in your house? And she was quiet again, and I said, you're quiet because the answer is no. Well, my job is to make sure that if I have to stop 9 good people to make sure that I stop that 1 bad person, that's my job. That's what they expect from me. And you know why I'm okay with that? Because we have laws in place that allow people to come into our country legally. And what we're saying is you must follow the laws. That's the justice piece of it. And so I get that the immigration and there's the border security, but in the end, I have a responsibility to protect our communities. And that is what I think we must do as a country, is we have to protect our borders, but we do need to fix the immigration piece. And we need to figure out how we get good people in here that can be contributing members of our society. But we can't let the third world of the third world come in here and expect that we won't become a third world country ourselves.
Yeah. I want to go back to that immigration piece in a hot minute, but before I do, are there any other countries that you know of in the world that just have open borders and anybody can come in and there isn't due process, like France or England or Canada? Or are there any other countries like that currently that you're aware of?
No, and let me take it a step point. Give you a perfect example is all those countries that surround Palestine, including Egypt, which also borders Palestine. They're not taking those folks. Most people don't take England or France. France is having major problems right now because they have had trouble controlling their borders, and they think they put too much emphasis on the mercy piece of it. Oh, we got to be good people and let everybody in. Yeah. No, you owe it to your society to make sure you protect your society. You can't just open the borders and let everybody in. There is serious risks, physical risks, national security risks, but there's financial risks that are associated with it. And also, you are creating victims because the folks who think they might be able to come here and make a better life, who are being sold and lied to by the cartels and NGOs all throughout the world, they're being told if you show up to the border, you can just walk across and have the American dream. They are victims as well. Americans are victims. The people coming across are victims. The only people who benefit are the cartels and the politicians, because they continue to throw this around like a political football. And in the end, everybody is victimized by it, except for the cartels and the government. They tend to benefit from it as well.
What is it, before we pivot over to immigration, what is it about the border policy that Americans can do, right? I think oftentimes we're like, oh, we wish we could do something.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we can do, whether it's through policy voting, through awareness, through what we pay attention to, that we can do maybe our part in having our voices in what we want our country to do heard?
Voting to have consequences. You know, and I think oftentimes people let personalities affect what is best for our country. We get our feelings hurt, and so we say, well, I'm not going to vote for that person. And then what the results are disastrous open border policies. And so voting is one of them. Send letters, send comments to your elected officials on the national and local level and tell them you're not happy with what's going on. Those are ways that you can help, and that's what our process of this republic has put in place. And so we have an opportunity in November to make those changes. And if we don't, then you know what? We've become the enablers and we are part of the problem. There is no way, in my opinion, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, that you can allow this administration to continue with how they have completely failed the American people at the southern border. The national security threat that they have presented to the American people, that they have thrust upon us, whether it's in the way of fentanyl or potential terrorist threats, actual physical threats, cyber threats, all of that. The fact that they have allowed this on their watch should be immediate disqualification for them for being able to continue in this job. We must make a change. If we don't reverse course, like you alluded to, there's no other countries that are doing what we're doing. And because America is so great, we've been able to absorb that, but we can't do it forever. And I think what we have absorbed already could be catastrophic. It's only time will tell. It is already catastrophic. Ask Laken Riley's family. Ask Rachel Morin's family out of Maryland. Ask 12-year-old Jocelyn Nagare's family. I would think they would tell you a totally different story. So I think we owe it to the American people, and the way we can best do that is by voting and making sure that we have people in there that have an America First idea that we're going to protect our borders. And to say that somebody wants to protect their borders, to say that they don't care about the mercy piece of it is just totally, that's a lie too. I like to see myself as one of the most merciful people, that we do this job every day and I see both sides of it.
What happened to those three names that you just shared for somebody who doesn't know?
Yeah, so Laken Riley was a lady in Georgia who was killed by an illegal alien. Rachel Morin, a mother, raped and killed out in Maryland. They ended up finding the guy in Tulsa. Jocelyn Nungare was a 12-year-old who was raped and murdered. by a couple people, folks who had crossed the border illegally. And there are far more examples of this crimes, by the way. These are just 3 that are been very public. But this type of crime is happening every day. And most Americans won't know about it because the FBI's crime statistics, the NIBRS system that they have, which they collect all the crime statistics, there is no box to check to say that that person was in this country illegally.
So there's really no real data that we can look to that is accurate to show what the consequence is of this failed policy.
The data exists, they alter the data. By the time it's fed back on a national level back to the American people, it has been crafted in a way that might be anti-Second Amendment, pro-open borders, because they're not telling you what crimes are being listed. Oftentimes those crimes are listed as having been committed by a white person. And there is no box to check for somebody who was in this country illegally who committed a crime like that.
You know, it's interesting you'd said about the leadership of our country, and I often think about, because government is so expansive, sometimes we're kind of removed from just the basic common sense approach to leadership. And I look at this as like, if we took it out of the country's scope and we're like, if we had the leader of a business, right? You lead this big business and there's a couple hundred people that work here, and you start hiring and you start developing rules and policies that allow anybody to work here. There's no standard, there's no criminal background checks, and you can just come in and you can work. And then bad things start to happen within those policies that you've created for your business. Obviously, whoever allowed that to happen would also be the one that should obviously look at being failed of their position, right? And so I think when we don't look at this as like Republican or Democrat, and we just look at it as a position, either success or failure, what does it look like? What does success look like? And what does failure look like? And what does our country look like? And I think when we simplify it and remove all of the left-right, it's pretty clear to see that what we've been doing is not working. So we need to do something different, or what do we get? The definition of insanity. So that brings me to just a point with borders and immigration. Obviously, I think they're lumped together, but they are very different. And I'm curious what your thoughts are. If we also have immigration issues, if there is reform that needs to happen, because I know that you're switching out from what you've been doing for the last 8 years, and you're going into this crazy world of politics, but yet you're not a politician. I mean, you're in the world, but you're not. You're law enforcement, right? I mean, you're defending and protecting, and that's why I love to have these conversations as opposed to a politician that's been in for 20 years, because you don't even know what they're saying is true, you know, because they're just trying to get 4 more years.
They just want votes.
Exactly. And you, as we even said, like, win or lose, like, you're here for the right reason, and it's rare to meet someone. So 1, I want to acknowledge you for that, but 2, I want to see what was your real reason for wanting to step into this new ring?
Well, it kind of goes back to the border thing. You know, look, I've got some personal reasons as to why we ended up doing this. You used the term want. I never wanted to do this. We felt compelled to do it, and we felt driven to do it, and we had some personal tragedy that kind of really was the last thing that really drove us to pushing us down this road. But in the end, what I realize is there's an old Danish saying that says, whoever has the ability has the responsibility. And I've just never been the type of person that stands there and watches the building burn to the ground and, you know, I would sit there eating popcorn while it happens. Or I'm not the person that stands there and waits for somebody else to do something that I was perfectly capable of doing. I think, what does that say about me as a man? You know, I got asked this question, I've been talking about this lately, is I got asked a question by a military guy, and I get tons of questions about border, economy, abortion, crime, all of it. But he asked me one that was kind of, it was just not used to this question, and he said, what does honor mean to you? And you know, most people say, well, it's putting the shopping cart back when nobody's looking, or it is if they give you too much change, returning the change. That's integrity. Honor, I said to him, is doing what is right no matter what the consequence is. And he looked at me and he said, you're the first politician that's ever got it right. And I said, well, that's because I'm not a politician. That's why I got it right. But we need people of honor. And so when you talk about why I'm doing this, we need people that are willing to do what is right no matter what the consequence is. You know, I did it during COVID. I swear, I said, we're not going to do the COVID lockdowns. I did it when we said we're not doing the mask mandates and the vaccine mandates. And of course, the media just, you know, every opportunity they get to just hammer you, they do. But I didn't care because it was what was right. and the consequence was irregardless of that.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up where we would sing these songs in church. And one of the songs, before I could even read or write, and I think this probably lends to a lot of my patriotism, was called Do What Is Right. And the chorus of the song was, do what is right, let the consequence follow. Battle for freedom in spirit and might, and with stout hearts look ye forth till tomorrow. God will protect you, then do what is right. And so we've always had that mantra in our house, like, just do what is right. Whatever happens, happens after that. And so I think that we looked at it as a family and said, we need people that are honorable, that will do what is right. But we also need people that have experience in these issues.
Yeah.
And the issues we're dealing with as a state and as a country are border, economy, crime, and national security.
Yeah.
And I have spent a career in crime, you know, reducing crime. There is no candidate. You're not going to find a candidate that's more experienced in law enforcement in this race or in this election cycle or in border security. I'd be the most knowledgeable senator in the Senate as it relates to border security. And then on budgeting, I've run a budget of over $60 million. I'm expected to balance that budget and stay within that budget. I have variable costs. I'm a government organization, and yet I managed to stay within budget and balance the budget because I look at those tax dollars that those people give me. So when I looked at all those things, why am I doing it? Yeah. Because we felt compelled to do something about it, and then we also had the experience to do something about it.
When you recited those lyrics, did you get a little emotional? Yeah,
because I think, it reminds me of what I've tried to instill in my family. You know, I've been kind of saying this on the campaign trail too, is Oliver North. I don't know if you remember Oliver North because you're pretty young. Oliver North, Iran-Contra. But Oliver North asked me, he said, at the very end of the podcast, he says, how do you want your children to remember you? And I said, well, I want them to remember me as a patriot who fought valiantly for God, family, freedom, and the Constitution. And so they're emotional issues for me because I love this country. I love freedom. And I think we need people that I'm disgusted as I watch as people who don't take these things serious, who care more about votes, who care more about power, who care more about money, are throwing away the freedoms that so many honorable men and women sacrificed to give us.
Yeah. I could feel it when you were sharing that. I could feel that. So I hope that was okay to circle back to it.
Oh, yeah, it was. But I'll tell you what, just to put a pin on that is recently, just last week, I was at this event and it was one of my daughter's friends was there. And she was sitting there and she said, hey, I had your grandson, Brody, my grandson's 4 years old. And we were driving around and he saw an American flag and he said, oh, look, an American flag. And then he paused for a couple seconds. He said, that's my papa's flag.
Aww.
So knowing that what I wanted to accomplish of being known as a patriot who loves this country is clearly rubbing off, and our family believes in this. So yeah, it's an emotional issue for us. Yeah.
And speaking of family, your family hasn't been free of tragedy.
No.
Or challenge. And I know obviously with the timing of everything, if it's something that's okay to ask you about.
Sure, yes.
But I think a lot of times the reason I'd like to ask is because a lot of times people see successful people or people they look up to or admire, or, running for office, and they think that you're free of challenge or free of challenges that have happened or struggles or adversity in your life. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe just sharing some of the struggle that happened in your life, and maybe if that intensified your decision to run now and how that played a role.
Look, I know a lot about the border and I could talk for hours on that. I could probably talk longer on the challenges that I've had in life. Look, life's not easy for any of us. You can sit and choose to dwell on the challenges that you get hit with or that life throws at you, or you can accept those and use those for what they are, which are experiences in life that are trying to make you the best you can be. I wrote 2 books, and I'll tell you why I wrote the first book in a second, but my second book was called American Sheriff, Rules to Live By. And it's based on the poem by Rudyard Kipling. And in that poem, it's called If. And in that poem, it's a great poem. He says, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those 2 imposters just the same. The reality is that life, there's nothing good or bad about what we go through. It's life's experiences. How we determine if they're good or bad, it depends solely on us. Some are tougher than others. You know, you talk about that tragedy we experienced. I have 5 children. One of my kids is part of the reason why I hate drugs and I hate fentanyl so much. One of my kids, probably about the time I was going through my first election, because you spend so much time away from the home, got into and went down the wrong path and got into drugs and was going down the wrong path. And we were doing everything we could. We had taught all our kids right, but you know, in the end, there's something called freedom where we all get to choose how we live our lives, and he was choosing wrong. And it was a struggle for our family, and it was creating a lot of, you know, just a lot of hard times in our family. And I'm the sheriff, and here I am, I have a son who's addicted to drugs. And at one point, we said, you can't drive our cars anymore. And he said, okay. We left, we went to an event, and it was a charity event, and I got a call, and he says, Dad, I just hit a guy on a bike. Well, what he had done is taken one of our cars and went to go to Taco Bell, and not far from our house, hits this guy on a bike. And so we zip back over there, and I get out of the car, and I look at my son, and I check on him and make sure he's okay. And then I walk over to where the guy's laying, and I can see the guy is I'm praying that they're working him, you know, the paramedics are working him, and I'm just praying that he's going to be okay, because that's a whole nother level of response, you know, consequences. One of the hardest things I've ever done, which we talk about honor, was walking back over to my son, who was 19, I think at the time, and looking at him in his face and saying, I'm sorry, but I have to leave you here. If I stay here, they're going to say that I influenced this case in some way. And then I just said, you're on your own. Turned around and we walked away. We got in the car and we drove off. And that's a hard thing to do. He was surrounded by 8 deputies. I knew what he was in for. So that son, that was kind of the start of him turning his life around. Not long after that, he had another kind of scary thing, and he cleaned his life up. But he got charged with ag assault with a deadly weapon. So my wife and I both wrote our first books, because we had to pay for the legal fees. So we wrote our books so that we could go out and sell them at gun shows every week or wherever else we could. We would sell these books so that we could pay for the legal fees. And I had to pay out. I had the guy, I was getting sued because the car was mine. It was in our name, even though, and he lived at my house. So I ultimately became liable for what happened, what he did. And the guy deserved to be paid. I mean, the guy had, so
he lived.
He did live, thank goodness. But I mean, he got charged because it caused permanent damage. My son got charged with ag assault with a deadly weapon. So my son ends up going and spending 6 months in my jail. And at this point, he'd been clean for about 1.5 years. He had a fiance. He gets out of jail in October, and he had a 10-month-old daughter. And we get into December, and life was going pretty good. On Wednesday, he tells me, hey, this is December 14th. He says, Dad, I paid off all my fines. I'm going to get my license back on Monday. Everything's good. And Friday, he goes to work. Friday, December 16th. His fiance leaves work, and with my 11-month-old granddaughter, they leave. And she was like a daughter to us, too. We had let her, she lived with us for 2 years. She goes to pick him up, and they hadn't come back. And at 8:30 at night, we got a knock on the door, and we opened the door, and it was Paul Penzone, the Sheriff of Maricopa County, 2 of my chiefs, and 2 guys from Gilbert PD. And one of my chiefs looked at me, and he's known my kids forever, and he just looked at me and said, Cooper and the baby are dead. Just like that, I lost my 22-year-old son, my 11-month-old granddaughter, and my soon-to-be daughter-in-law. Somebody driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs killed all 3 of them. My daughter-in-law died a few days later, but killed all 3 of them. And, you know, that'll knock anybody off path. And, you know, you can sit there and nobody would blame you for dwelling in the grief that comes with that. And we did. Like, I wasn't interested in doing anything. Wasn't interested in running for Senate or sheriff. Wasn't interested in getting out of bed. And it was basically just kind of pushing through and just finding some something to get us through. And we attribute it to our faith, and we attribute it to the prayers of so many people. But we kind of got to the other side of it, and somebody said something, and that really was the first spark of feeling that we had had in weeks. And it had to do with the Senate. And my wife and I just looked at each other and said, this is what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so there is no guarantee for tomorrow, and the only thing you take with you in this life is what you do. So we made a conscientious decision that we were going to get up and move forward. You know, I have 600 employees. They're watching what happens with the leader when he falls in the front. Is he going to get up and move forward? And so we had 4 other kids. How were we going to respond to it? Were we going to get up and move forward for our other kids? And so we did. We decided to get up and move forward.
Well, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. And I think anytime you're talking to an audience that's watching or listening to us right now, that there are people that are going through tough times. Yeah. Not as difficult as that, maybe. Maybe so.
Some more.
Some more, right? We don't know, but we know that every human struggles. That's part of life, right? Because we don't grow through the ease. We don't grow through our successes. We grow through the struggles and the pain. Is there anything that you could say to someone, whether it's a parent that just lost someone, or a spouse that just lost their husband or wife, or maybe a parent that's going through something with addiction troubles with their own kids, that you can just share maybe a piece of hope or advice, or what you and your wife did to get on the other side of this?
You know, as far as the addiction piece, you know, when my son did clean up his life, we asked him, what is it that we could have done different? Like, where did we fail? Where did we not teach you?
Yeah.
And he said, it wasn't anything to do with you. He goes, I was going to make my own decisions. But what you did was you gave me some place to come home to. So I think for all those parents who are struggling with youth who are maybe not making the best decisions, the only thing you can ultimately really do is just have a loving place where they can come home to. You can't condone what they're doing. They're going to do, that's the thing with freedom. So I did a podcast recently, and I talked about how some people get angry with God when bad things happen. They say, why would he let bad things happen? And I've always looked at it a little bit different. I look at it as say, what an amazing God we have that would be willing to, who loves freedom so much that he doesn't intervene when somebody is exercising their freedom. Is that not what we all want? Is to have ultimate freedom? And you have a God that was willing, because he could have easily have intervened and stopped that guy from hitting my 3 kids and killing my 3 kids. But ultimately, would that have been pro-freedom? Or in the end, freedom has risks. There are dangers that come with it. And I've accepted that. And I understand that none of us make it out of this life alive. I can tell you that. I've been in law enforcement. I've been to many homes where we've had to take people that have passed away out of the home or off an accident scene or whatever. And what I know is, no, we don't get out of this life alive. And so I think that understanding that, I think it's perfectly okay to grieve. And everybody's going to grieve different. So my first thing I say to people is, that is okay. And how you grieve is yours. That's up to you. I don't think there's any one right way to grieve. I think understanding that other people have gone through it is always something that helps us as humans. You know, we like to know that other people have kind of gone through it and survived it. We were at an airport maybe 6 or 8 months after this had happened, and this lady comes up to us and she was crying, and she just gave my wife a big hug. She said, "Can I give you a hug?" And she managed to tell us, she says, I just got word last night my son died, and I'm flying to Washington to deal with my son's death. We didn't do anything special, but we were there it was like a sign for her that that you can make it through it.
Because you were on the other side.
We had been on the other side.
And I feel like sometimes that's just what people need that moment. Like in the deepest, darkest moments of life, is like you just need proof that someone else has got on the other side of it. And I think it's why it's so important for us to share these struggles. So thank you for sharing that. Because obviously by you sharing that and her seeing you made her pain a little bit easier.
And we've had multiple experiences like that where people have said, I went through the same thing you did. I saw how you responded to it publicly. We had done a video probably about a week later, because we couldn't do a video until we knew what had happened to our daughter-in-law. And a week later, ultimately we ended up having to take her off of life support, and she passed away. And so my wife and I did a video either that night, and a lot of people said, hey, that video was amazing. We literally did not rehearse the video. We just turned on the camera and did one cut video.
Of just sharing.
And just sharing. And it was probably a 45 second video. And, you know, it's those little things that help people kind of get through it. So there's nothing I can really, there's no magic word I can say. I think really just knowing that there's other people that have gone through what you're going through, and you can make it through. And none of it is designed to punish you. Yeah. None of it is designed to be awful. Yeah. It is all designed in some godly way, that it is all designed to make you better. Yeah. It is designed to drag the greatness that each one of us have inside of us. And some of us go through some experiences that are unique to us for that purpose. And once you realize that, I think it helps you process what life throws at you a lot better.
Yeah. How much has faith played a role in your life?
Faith for me is everything. I think in this profession of law enforcement, if you don't have faith, I don't know what anchor, you have to have some anchor that keeps you from floating out to sea. You know, without an anchor, you are a boat with no direction. And so I think you need an anchor and a rudder. And for me, that is faith. You know, my belief in God, I think it's what's gotten us through the tough times in our lives. Yeah. And I think for me, it's everything. It's paramount. You know, when I say that I believe, and I'm not a politician, I'm a patriot who believes in God, family, freedom, and the Constitution, I mean that. Yeah. And, you know, when we lost our kids, that's when you're really faced with, do you really believe what you say you believe?
In the challenge, yeah.
Do you really have the faith you say you have? And those challenges will test you to see if that is what the level is you do have. Yeah. And so we were tested, and I think ultimately in the end, it's what got us through. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And my gosh, I feel like we could go another hour. I wanted to just kind of bring this back full circle, because you've been through so many things. You've seen so many things that honestly, not all humans have the capacity to even see, like some of the things that you've seen in law enforcement and as a sheriff, and all the things that you're involved with, and all the things that you and your wife and your family have been through. I always ask this question, and it's so funny because I've never asked it in this way. I normally ask people that have built like wealth and businesses and stuff, kind of this final signature question, and I am fascinated to know how you're going to respond to this. But now that you've been through all of these things in life, when I say this word to you, I want you to share what comes to mind. How would you define wealth today, Sheriff Lamb, in 2024? What does wealth mean to you?
For me, wealth is my family, my relationship with God, and whether or not I have whatever role you're put in, whether it's business, public service, as a father, a mother, have you succeeded in that role? If you have, you're a wealthy person. I mean, wealth is not we attribute wealth to money, but many of us choose to take different routes. I could have easily have been in business, had many opportunities to go down the business road and make money. That's not what my soul called to do. I felt a calling towards something else. So for me, wealth, and I talk to kids all the time about this, I think wealth is really just becoming the best you that you can be. It might be money, it might be a successful career, but whatever it is, your wealth that you take from this world. I have gone into many homes and pulled many dead bodies out of homes and off of traffic places. And you know what? You never leave. You don't even leave with your wallet. We take that from you because we need your ID to tell us who you are. Nobody leaves with their wallet. So wealth is certainly not money. Wow. Wealth is, what have you done here in this life? And whatever responsibility you were given, did you do it to the best of your ability? So for me, that's wealthy. So I consider myself a wealthy person. I can stand in a room with billionaires and millionaires and feel equal to them because of how I view the wealth that I've been able to achieve in my life.
I I love that answer. Thank you so much for that. Please tell everyone, how can they find out more? Obviously, you've got a pretty exciting next couple months ahead of you. How can they find out more, find your books, learn more about your policies and your positions and everything that you're looking to take into office?
So if you want our books, my wife's site, because I had a website and it ended up in a sale of a company. So I don't have, it's AmericanSheriff.com is what it was.
Oh, okay.
But you can still go there. It's that's who I sold it to. But then you have The Sheriff's Wife. So my wife's book is The Sheriff's Wife, holding it all together behind the scenes in politics. And then she has another one called Bravery and Blinders. And then mine is American Sheriff, Traditional Values in a Modern World, and also American Sheriff, Rules to Live By.
Awesome.
You can get that at sheriffswife.com. We'll sign it and send it to you.
Awesome.
But then you can follow me on Instagram at American Sheriff, on Twitter, Sheriff Lamb 1, on Facebook at Sheriff Lamb, and sherifflambforsenate.com. Yep, and that's what we're doing right now. Yeah, it's going to be a crazy, July 30th is the primary.
Awesome.
And then, I don't know when you're airing this, so I hope I didn't date this.
No, you're going to be
July
good.
30th is the primary, and then we have November for the general election. And just please, everybody, get out and vote. I mean, our country is worth taking a few moments to let your voice be heard. We've got to take our country back, and we've gone down the wrong road.
Yeah.
And so, please come support at any one of those. Thank you so much for having me on. And I love what you do too. I think you're a real example and just a shining light. You know, there's certain accounts that you see online, especially when it comes to money, seeing certain people that come out and just are like a bright light, and that's you. So
thank you. Well, thank you for being here. We're going to link all the information in the bottom for the show notes. Obviously, if you're in Arizona, you said the date, July 30th.
July 30th.
And then again in November, where every American should go out and have their voice heard. So critical, I believe, in 2024 than any other year, at least in my lifetime thus far. So.
And if you're an independent, you can vote too. So most independents don't realize you can vote in a primary. You can show up on voting day, request a Republican or a Democrat ballot, and you can vote on one of those primaries.
Good to know.
Please, if you're an independent, you can vote in a primary.
Amazing.
Go out there, and you might see Mark Lamb on there. Just fill in the bubble right next to it. It's real simple.
We learned something new today. That's great. Thanks again. It was such an honor to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me.